Hello and welcome. Today we are actually going to discuss about the sentiment analysis application development using NodeRED platform. Okay. So before we start, we have to understand that what do you mean by the sentiment analysis and what is the basic need of the sentiment analysis. Okay. So here it is. Why or what is the sentiment analysis? We can say in a very brief way that the fundamental need of the sentiment analysis is to perform the social media monitoring, understanding the market trends of a particular product, understanding the popularity of the news, and sometimes understanding of an event which is impactful to the society or the common people. So those are the some major factor that why we should do the sentiment analysis. Okay. So basically it is a very much useful nowadays world that is about certain news or maybe about certain applications or about certain products which are how much impactful it is, or maybe how much impact of a particular news in the society, that can be easily understand and that can be easily derived by using the sentiment analysis technique. Okay, so that is the primary objective of the sentiment analysis. Now in order to create a application of such a thing like sentiment analysis, we can take the help of the different platforms. Now we are mainly focusing here in the IoT application development platform, where we can take the data of the sentiment, that means you can say the sentiment data from the different news channels, right? What is basically the requirement here is just written over there by using the NodeRED application. Okay, now definitely NodeRED is a lightweight application which is primarily used for developing the IoT applications. So we can use the different component of the NodeRED in order to analyze the sentiment of the different news channel and all these things. Okay, so what we basically can do is something like that. We have to have a feed parser, we have to have a sentiment node, we have to have a function node, we have to have the dashboard output for the text. We can also include a voice output as well to read out the news also, right? So these are the components that we can actually use for analyzing the sentiment. Now how or what is the algorithm behind a sentiment analysis system, that we can also consider. Okay, now basically the sentiment of a particular news can be identified by applying that how much impactful it is, whether it is of a positive sentiment news or whether it is of a negative sentiment news, or might be sometime it is a neutral sentiment news sometime. Okay, so positive sentiment news means definitely it is having a good impact in the society. If it's a negative sentiment news, then definitely I can say that it might be have some negative impact in the society, or a very it is a rather a very bad news. Most of the cases nowadays days, if we consider the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus throughout the globe, is actually is an example of a negative sentiment news. Why? Because most of the news channels are showing the outbreak of this virus as well as the death toll of in the current scenario. So everything basically is of negative sentiment. Okay, so this algorithm that is actually executes in order to find out the sentiment analysis or sentiment values are actually based upon that, whether it is a positive or whether it is a negative. Okay, so in order to find out these particular features, basically what that particular algorithm is used, it is a very popular kind of algorithm which is based on the AFINN 165 word list. Now AFINN 165 word list is basically is a very standard word list. Okay, now in this case, for this particular application, that is for the NodeRED, the sentiment analyzer algorithm is actually based upon that AFINN 165 word list. Now what that word list actually says, this word list basically says, or it impose certain weight value corresponding to each and every words. Okay, now the thing is that, as the second point says, that the Node.js API has been uh, has been in the form of a development of the sentiment analyzer, and words are in this case words are always get splitted into the tokens. Okay, so that means our Node.js API itself will actually generate that particular tokens by taking the sentences, and it will split it into word, and it will become something like tokens. Okay, now in AFINN 165 word list, basically there are, each tokens has been assigned certain weight values. Okay, and that weight values are actually starting from -5 to +5, the range of the weight value is. Okay, so that means highly negative sentiment, a word that is having highly negative sentiment, is basically assigned as -5. A word having highly positive sentiment is actually assigned to +5, and all other words are lie between -5 to +5 according to their sentiment negativity or the positivity. If there is any neutral sentiment word is there, then definitely it will be considered as 0 value, right? So this is the fundamental idea of the AFINN word list, and based upon that word list, the sentiment analysis algorithm is perform operations. Okay, so Node.js API, which is actually applicable for this sentiment analysis, actually pick the data or pick the sentence from the different news channels. Okay, and it will actually split entire news channel or entire news sentence into several words. Okay, and that words are actually considered as the token. Okay, and based upon the AFINN word list, this token get assigned certain values in between -5 to +5. Okay, and after that, overall sentiment will be computed by sum up the entire value of the sentiment of each and every token. Okay, the sum of the value of the sentiment of each token will become just give you as a result of the overall sentiment of that particular sentence or the news. Okay, so if we consider an example, something like that, that suppose I have a sentence like that: I love cat but I am allergic to them. That means what? That means it is considered as a sentence. Now what we can do, we can split it up into tokens. So what are the token that we can find from this particular sentence? Something like this: I love cat but I am allergic to them. Okay, so according to the AFINN 165 word list, if we consider, the sentiment value corresponding to each and every tokens are listed in the third section. So over there, what it is written, that 0 is for I, for love that is +3, cat is for 0, but is 0, I is 0, am is also 0, allergic -2, 2 0, and them 0. Now basically I, then but, then am, all these words or tokens are actually of a neutral sentiment word. Okay, so there is 0 value is actually imposed over there, whereas love is a positive sentiment word, so it is +3 is actually imposed over there. Allergy is a negative sentiment word, so it has been given -2 according to AFINN 165 word list. Okay, so therefore from those values or weight value, if we compute the total score, the total score will become something like this: 0 + 3 + 0 + 0 + 0 + -2 + 0 + 0, which is equal to 1. So therefore you can say the total score is basically 1, and the competitive score corresponding to that is total score divided by number of tokens. Okay, so how many tokens are there? that will be a count for a lot, and we can get the comparative score by applying total score divided by number of tokens. In this case, it is total number of tokens are 9 and total score is 1, so the comparative score is 0.1111. Okay, so based upon this particular analysis, we can judge that whether a particular news or maybe whether a particular thing or maybe product is considered as as in a positive sentiment or is in a negative sentiment. All right, so in the next part we will just try to emphasize that how we can actually create this device, or you can say an application, so that we can get that sentiment value and analyze them, and then we can give some output in a form of graphical user interface. Okay, so that is our next task that we can do. So in order to do that, basically what we need is to need the NodeRED application. Now mind it that NodeRED is a very common application which is used as a web application in order to develop and deploy the IoT services and IoT apps. Okay, the advantage of NodeRED is that you can directly create your application in the web form for web part, where there is a flow editor is given to you, and as you are creating that particular application, you can directly deploy it and you can have a web-based interface in order to interact with your device, right? So without any further delay, we will just go to the application part, that how you can create the NodeRED application now. So over here you can see I have already created a simple sentiment analyzer application. Okay, now you can see there are several items are there. Okay, now these particular items here are actually known as the nodes. Now this is the fundamental backbone of the NodeRED application. Each and every entity and each and every objects are actually considered as node. Okay, so our first node that we need to use is that feed parser node. Okay, now how can we get these nodes? Basically, if you go to the left hand side, you can see there are lots of nodes are actually present. You can install them manually, and by default when you install your NodeRED server, it will also available. Some of the nodes are basically available. Okay, some of the nodes you can install explicitly, right? So what we can do over there, can simply use a feed parser node. So you can see in the advanced tab there is feed parser. Okay, now what is the job of this feed parser? The fundamental job of this feed parser node is to parse the RSS feeds from different news channels. Okay, so basically RSS feeds are very common for the news channel in nowadays. If we go to any news channel, and if we type this feed RSS feed corresponding to that, you can subscribe to that feed. RSS is a really simple syndication which can connect your device or your application with the news channel, so that any recent news is coming, they will actually fetch from that particular news channel and you can display that in your application itself. Okay, so that is one of the advantage of the RSS feeds. Now over here in this case we are using this CNN RSS feed. So you can see easily that here it is written rss.cnn.com/rss then edition.rss. So how can we get this? In the Google, if you type CNN XML RSS or CNN RSS feeds, so it will show you that particular location, that from where you can actually get those RSS feeds. Okay, you can see there are the CNN RSS top stories, the world, Africa, America, different for the different region. There are different RSS feeds are actually available. Okay, and for the different services like sports or technology, science and spaces, there are the different RSS feeds are there. What you can do, you can just copy that particular RSS feed link. Okay, and then over there for that particular feed parser, just open it and just paste the feed URL over there, right? And then press done. Okay, that means now your application, that particular node, is now able to fetch the RSS feeds from that particular news server. Okay, now after doing this, we have to have another important node, that is known as the analyzer node. Okay, so this analyzer node, what is the job? This is particularly that sentiment analysis system. Okay, so the algorithm is actually run inside this analyzer node by considering the FINN 165 word list. So it will split your entire news into different tokens and apply the weight value over there and compute the complete sentiment score. Okay, so basically this sentiment analyzer is actually produce some sentiment score and the values. Okay, so the sentiment score is that total score that is actually used to judge that whether that sentiment is a positive sentiment or a negative sentiment value, right? So with this, we can connect this analyzer with several other function nodes as well as with a debug node. Now the job of debug node, you can already you can say that it will actually directly give you that output into our debug console. Okay, and the parser, this parser is basically a function which just fetch the value, and that value will actually send into our dashboard as a text. That means what is the score of that particular sentiment, that will be actually shown into your graphical user interface screen. Same thing, we are also introducing some gauge node and some audio node as well. Okay, so what is the job of this gauge node? This is also a part of the dashboard component. So what you can do, you can directly use this gauge node so that you can make a graphical user interface corresponding to sentiment value. Okay, that means whether your sentiment is increasing or decreasing, based on that the gauge value will actually changes, right? Finally, you can also add an audio output so that whatever the data will be coming as a news in your application, it will simply read out that application or read out that particular news. So as a whole, you can consider that particular system is kind of a news channel, or might be kind of a FM radio which is talking, or which is just telling the news for you, as well as it will analyze the value of your news, whatever the news is coming, and accordingly it will show you in the output stream. Okay, thirdly, you can also use another application or another node which can store the score and all these tokens as a part of the further analytics. Okay, so in order to do that, you can use a file storage node. Okay, so by using another function node, we are actually storing all these data or all these sentiment values into a storage. Okay, so how can we get this storage value? We simply can use this file node in order to create this storage node actually. Okay, so what it will do, whatever the data or whatever the message payload is coming from this analyzer, it will simply store that into this node or this file. Now you can mention the file format. We are mentioning this file format as data.json. So whenever the data value is coming, it will actually store in a JSON file format. All right. So now you can go to the property of different nodes, so that you can understand that what are the different features and functionalities are actually imposed into that particular nodes. Okay. So over here you can see the analyzer. Now in the analyzer, the fundamental property is that it will take the values in the form of a set of characters, or maybe you can say a kind of a string, a kind of sentence, and analyze it, and whatever the data it will be actually generated, that generated data will be sent through the message payload. Okay. Now what is the job of this particular function? This particular function, you can see here is a set of statement is given, that is basically a JavaScript statement that we are actually writing. So we will check here that message.sentiment.score, whether the score value is greater than 0 or not. Then what we will display, we are just displaying the sentiment of the news is positive and the value is whatever the score is. Okay, it will just concatenate it and it will store into the message payload, and it will redirect it to the target text. Okay. Again we are writing else if, then if it is a negative value, then we have to mention the sentiment value is negative and the score corresponding to score. Otherwise we just write it is as a neutral and the score is there. Okay, if it is a 0. Okay, and finally it will return towards the text node, which will display the particular result. Okay. So the second function simply display the score value in a form of gauge. Okay, so that's why we are just fetching out the message.sentiment.score value, and that score value will actually store into message.payload. Okay, that means the score itself is become the payload now. Okay, and that value will redirect to the gauge node. Okay, now in the gauge node we just can set its group. We are setting it as a home within the home group as with the name of test. Okay, so it will appear into a home tab, within that home tab as a name as a test. Okay, after that we are connecting this particular analyzer node with the audio out node. Okay, so that whatever the data will be coming as a string, it will directly go to the audio out device, and that audio out will actually read the particular message or particular news corresponding to your sentiment value. Okay, and finally this fn2 node, this will only fetch the sentiment, and that sentiment value will be stored as the message payload. Okay, and finally that value will be stored into that data.json file. Okay, in the D drive itself. Okay, so this is the final approach of the application, or this is the flow of the application that we are creating. Okay, now after creation of this particular application, what you can do, you simply press this deploy button. You can see there is a deploy button is written over here. Okay, so as you click on this deploy button, the application will get deployed. Okay, so I'm just pressing it, so it will say writing successfully deployed. That means now your application is ready. Now how you can fetch that application? Mind it that your local service, if we had installing your NodeRED application in a local PC, then it will be run into your local IP address, which is this 127.0.0.1, and the port number is 1880 itself. Okay, so you can run this NodeRED in your PC, or maybe you can run this NodeRED in Raspberry Pi, or else sometime you may run this NodeRED into the cloud platform like IBM Watson. Now, thankfully, NodeRED is basically a product of IBM, so there is a great support for NodeRED application in the IBM Watson cloud is already present. So you can easily deploy this NodeRED application into the IBM Watson cloud as well. Okay, so what is our next task is just to deploy as we are deploying it. So just see the output of this particular application. Okay, so for that, what you need to do, you just copy this particular address, copy, then open a new tab, just paste that address, then write slash UI slash, then press enter. So what it will show you, it will show you the current value of the sentiment. Okay, so that sentiment value of this, or sentiment of the news, is basically negative, and the value is -1. Okay, so it will actually showing you that particular output corresponding to this particular node, right? Now I think there are two or more than two things are actually coming. This is why, because of another application may be run within that. So what we can do, we can simply disable that application, and then finally we can do the redeployment as well. So just do again. Okay, so this is our final output. Now, along with the output of this particular gauge and the text, you can also see that there is a audio is coming actually. Okay, this audio is actually is nothing but a audio output that you can listen into your ear itself. Okay, so I can just make a demonstration of that. So we have the wireless IP address is this, so I'm just trying to add this IP address in my mobile phone so that I can listen to the audio also.
CNN's Daniel Dale fact-checks Vice President Mike Pence's response about coronavirus tests during the White House task force briefing. The morning after Ian Lahith returned to Beijing, he found a surveillance camera being mounted on the wall outside his apartment door. Its lens was pointing right at him. Bill Gates, philanthropist and founder of Microsoft, discusses the timeline for a potential vaccine for COVID-19. The Pentagon has officially released 3 short videos showing unidentified aerial phenomena that had previously been released by a private company.
Understand that how the news is actually coming here. Okay, now you can see the sentiment of the news is positive. That means another news is actually coming, which is a very positive news might be. Okay, so let's listen. You can check that particular news in the debug window as well. See the score corresponding to the news, which is -1, was at this 2:10 p.m. Okay, now within 1 second there is another message has been received, that is another news has been received, which is having a score of +6, which is a positive news. Okay, so that means what, your application is actually in a real time, it is monitoring and detecting that whether the CNN news, they are giving some negative values or negative news or positive news. At the very beginning, at this 2:10 in 40 seconds, whatever the news is actually given by the CNN RSS feed was about the coronavirus, the outbreak and the negativity of the coronavirus. Whereas after this, it is giving a positive news about some positive vibe of of positive steps taken by the different governments. So that's why the news will become immediately become us having a +6 score. Okay. So in this way, you can actually create a sophisticated IoT application through which you can analyze the sentiment of a particular application or sentiment of a particular social media, might be sometime the news channels as well. Okay, so this is a very basic and a simple demonstration that how you can actually use the sentiment analysis as an application, and that can be used for analyze the different social media or different news channel as well. Okay, thank you so much.